Hey friends, welcome back. I've got my Minecraft world booted up already, which means it's the perfect time to get comfy and dive into some seriously messy drama. And trust me, it goes exactly where you want it to. Because the audacity is wild. Imagine someone so entitled they think they can manipulate grief and money in the same breath. Seriously, who wakes up one day and decides, you know what? I deserve someone else's inheritance, and let's be honest. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it stages a whole family intervention. The twists in this one are personal, ruthless, and so perfectly timed. You'll be clapping by the end. But it starts with one quiet betrayal that sets everything in motion. It started with a spreadsheet. Our company had just rolled out a new productivity tracking system. Some off-the-shelf software that logged time spent on tasks, attendance, emails, document edits, meeting durations, you name it, it tracked it. The kind of system that sounds good in theory, but always ends up being weaponized by people who care more about looking productive than actually being useful. And of course, no one was more excited about this system than my boss, Dana. Now, Dana was the kind of manager who treated corporate buzzwords like scripture, visibility, bandwidth, proactive synergy, all that garbage. She once made us sit through a 2-hour presentation about how to work smarter, not harder, and then immediately doubled our meeting quotas. She loved being in control, and she especially loved having a new toy to monitor performance gaps. At first, I didn't really care. I do my job, I show up on time, and I don't cut corners. If the system was fair, I figured I'd be fine. But that's not how Dana used it. Within 2 weeks, she started calling people into her office for productivity reviews. Most of us were getting flagged for low engagement metrics, basically not spending enough time in the apps she considered important, even if we were getting our actual work done. I noticed the pattern quickly. She never called in her favorites, just the quiet ones, the efficient ones, the people who didn't talk much during meetings or tried to look busy for the sake of it. I was one of them. The first time she called me in, I thought it was a check-in. She sat me down, opened her laptop with a smirk, and said, "So I've noticed some inconsistencies in your engagement data." Inconsistencies? I asked, genuinely confused. Yes, she said, swiveling the screen toward me. It looks like you're only spending about 22% of your day in the project management dashboard. That's below team average. I'm concerned that you're not collaborating effectively. Never mind the fact that I had completed all of my tasks for the past month ahead of schedule. Never mind that client satisfaction scores for my projects were the highest on our team. According to Dana, I was underperforming because I wasn't clicking around enough. I walked out of that meeting with a headache and a mission. Because here's the thing Dana didn't consider. I was the one who helped implement the tracking system. I knew how it worked, and I also knew how to run admin-level reports. So I started pulling data. On myself, sure, but also on Dana. And what I found? Chef's kiss. Turns out Dana was the queen of fake productivity. Her system flagged me for low dashboard activity, but her own metrics were a disaster. She spent an average of 6 hours a day in meetings, 90% of which were ones she scheduled. Half her emails were sent outside of business hours, but the timestamp data showed she'd written most of them during work hours and just scheduled them to send late at night. She was staging her workaholic image like it was a PR campaign. Oh, and the best part? Out of the 17 projects assigned to her for oversight that quarter, she had only opened documentation for 2 of them. 2. The rest, she just forwarded emails and assigned tasks to others, usually me. I started compiling everything: engagement logs, timestamps, meeting durations, internal communications. I even built side-by-side graphs comparing my low productivity with her optimized performance. Guess who had more client deliverables, higher quality scores, and fewer missed deadlines? Spoiler, not Dana. Then came the escalation. 2 days after our meeting, she sent me a formal performance improvement plan, a PIP, as HR calls it. The corporate version of a warning shot. She claimed I wasn't collaborating, wasn't visible, wasn't hitting engagement benchmarks. It was laughable. She even CC'd HR on the email, probably thinking it would intimidate me. I replied to the thread and asked to schedule a one-on-one meeting with her and HR to review the data together. She agreed, probably thinking I'd come crawling in with excuses. That gave me 4 days to polish my presentation. I turned my data into a 10-slide PowerPoint. Not flashy, Just graphs, timestamps, and documented receipts. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The numbers told the story all on their own. I even included a breakdown of her meeting costs. Yes, I actually calculated how much of our budget was being burned on her endless calls that produced zero deliverables. By the time Friday rolled around, I was ready. We met in a small conference room. Dana had her usual smug expression, tapping her pen like she was about to watch a student beg their way out of detention. HR sat next to her with a notepad. Dana started the meeting by reviewing my deficiencies: low dashboard use, minimal visibility in meetings, low engagement, all of it vague and unprovable unless you were using her twisted version of the data. She ended her speech with, "We need to see a clear plan for improvement, or we'll have to reassess your future here." I nodded. Then I opened my laptop. Before I respond, I said, "I'd like to walk you both through some context." And I started the presentation. I led with deliverables, how I'd completed 97% of assigned tasks on or ahead of deadline. Then I showed client feedback, consistently high scores, including direct praise. Then I layered in the engagement data, not from Dana's curated dashboard metrics, but the raw logs from the productivity tracker itself. That's when things got quiet. Then I pulled up Dana's metrics. I didn't frame it as an attack. I simply said, to provide context, I ran the same data for other team members to compare norms. And there it was, 6 hours a day in meetings, dozens of scheduled emails to simulate late-night work, almost no project file engagement, and 42% of her. Calendar labeled strategic planning, which in our office means vibes-based calendar filler. HR leaned forward. Dana's pen stopped tapping, and then I hit them with the final slide, budget drain. Based on her salary and how she allocated her time, Dana's non-productive hours were costing the company roughly $8,000 per week. Compared to my metrics, which showed a net surplus, the contrast was damning. That's when HR spoke up. "Would you mind sending us this presentation?" Dana tried to jump in, claiming the data was taken out of context, but HR shut it down fast. They said they needed to conduct a review of management oversight and that all performance improvement plans would be paused until further notice. And just like that, Dana's little trap snapped shut, with her foot in it. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe. We haven't even hit the juiciest story yet. Anyway, back to our friend cornering her boss with a color-coded chart and a mountain of receipts. By Monday morning, Dana was working remotely. By Friday, she was on administrative leave. 2 weeks later, a company-wide email announced a leadership restructuring initiative, and Dana was officially gone. A new manager took her place, and the PIP quietly removed from my file without a word. HR even thanked me for the presentation and asked if I'd be willing to help with future transparency initiatives. So yeah, sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's not dramatic. It's just the quiet satisfaction of watching someone choke on their own data. Wow, the fact that she built the entire surveillance system and didn't realize it would expose her is poetic. She really thought micromanaging people into submission would keep her safe. But she basically installed her own downfall and handed over the receipts with a timestamp. Sometimes karma doesn't even need to sneak up on you. It just pulls up a chair in the meeting room. But petty power trips don't just happen in offices. Sometimes they show up wearing matching bridesmaid dresses. Weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of your life. At least, that's what people say. And I wanted to believe it. I planned mine for over a year. Every flower, every photo angle, every table arrangement. Nothing extravagant, just intentional. I even kept the guest list small to keep things manageable. 60 people, close family, close friends, and 1 or 2 obligations I couldn't exactly dodge. One of those obligations was my cousin Rachel. Now, Rachel and I have never been close. She's one of those people who thrives in chaos but acts like it follows her around unfairly. She has 2 kids, Tyler, who's 10, and Ivy, who's 7, and she likes to talk about free-range parenting, which, in her case, basically just means no rules and 0 consequences. Still, I figured it'd be fine. It was one afternoon. What could possibly go wrong, right? The warning signs showed up during the ceremony, literally. We were halfway through our vows, standing in front of our families in a quiet outdoor garden. The officiant was speaking, I was holding my husband's hands, And then, I kid you not, Rachel's daughter Ivy ran up the aisle to ask her mom if she could have a juice box. Not whisper, not motion. Full sprint. My cousin waved her off. Just waved her off like we were at a park picnic and not in the middle of a wedding. The guests all turned, awkward chuckles rippling through the crowd. I looked over and saw Rachel scrolling on her phone, not apologizing, not redirecting her kid. Just scrolling. It threw me off, but we got through the vows. The reception? Oh, that was a disaster class in unparenting. Rachel's kids treated it like a playground. They climbed onto chairs, knocked over floral arrangements, and at one point I watched Ivy lick the frosting off someone else's cupcake before putting it back on the dessert table. I told Rachel gently that her kids were kind of disrupting things. She laughed and said, "They're just kids." Don't be uptight, don't be uptight. I'd spent 2 years saving for this wedding. I was trying to enjoy my first dance with my husband, while her son Tyler was running literal laps around us, making airplane noises. He nearly collided with our photographer. And what did Rachel do? She filmed it, on her phone, giggling like it was the cutest thing ever. She even shouted, "Go Tyler, you're gonna go viral." But that wasn't even the worst part. Then came the breaking point. During the cake cutting, our beautiful custom 3-tiered cake, Rachel's kids rushed the table before we even touched the knife. Tyler stuck his fingers into the frosting. Ivy reached up and yanked a sugar flower off the top. And while I stood there in stunned silence, my cousin took a picture. She said, "Oh my God, this is hilarious," and posted it before I even saw the damage. That's when I pulled her aside. No more polite smiles. I was done. I said, "Rachel, I love you, but your kids have ruined multiple parts of this day. Please keep them at your table. I'm serious." Her face changed instantly, like a switch. She crossed her arms and said, "Wow, you're really being that bride." "It's a wedding, not a funeral. Let them have fun," I said. "This day isn't about them. It's about me and Jake." And she rolled her eyes and said the words that pushed me over the edge. "I didn't realize you were so anti-family." "Oh, I'm anti-family? Because I don't want sticky hands in my wedding cake?" I walked away, not because I didn't have a response, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, I'd say something I'd regret. And honestly, I didn't want to give her a scene. I just wanted to survive the rest of the night. But later I came up with something much better. See, our photographer was incredible, professional, patient, and smart. She captured everything, including Rachel's kids mid-chaos, Ivy climbing on the dessert table, Tyler mid-air during the cake incident, guests cringing as children ran screaming behind the dance floor. I got the photo proofs about 2 weeks after the wedding, and they were gorgeous. But sprinkled among the stunning shots were these surreal, perfectly framed moments of Rachel's kids completely ruining everything, one after another, like a cinematic blooper reel from someone else's reality. So I made a decision. I posted a Facebook album titled "Moments from Our Wedding Day." The first few photos were soft and sweet, Jake straightening his tie, me hugging my grandma, the aisle walk, first kiss. Then I dropped the next section, behind the scenes, unexpected moments. And I let the photos speak for themselves. Tyler mid-sprint, mouth open in a war cry. Ivy with both hands inside a cupcake tray. Rachel laughing while her son tackled a centerpiece. Tyler's foot dangling in front of the lens during our first dance. The final image, our wedding cake smudged and lopsided, with Ivy's tiny hand still reaching into the frosting. I didn't write any captions, just the photos, just the truth. And people noticed. I got messages from guests saying, "Oh my God, I thought I saw that happen but didn't want to say anything." One friend commented, "Honestly, you handled that better than I would have." Even Jake's aunt, who adores kids, wrote, "There's a difference between letting kids have fun and letting them ruin someone's wedding." Rachel didn't comment, but she did make a cryptic status update that said, "Some people only show the parts of the story that make them look like the victim." Okay, projection much? But here's the kicker. 2 of her mutual friends, people who were at the wedding, called her out in the comments. One said, "I was there. Your kids were out of control and you were laughing through it." Another said, "You let them destroy that cake. You think that's okay?" The post got quiet after that. Rachel hasn't spoken to me since, which is honestly the best gift she could have given me. Wow. There's entitled, and then there's recording your kids ruin someone's wedding and calling it content. The fact that she tried to flip the narrative and call you anti-family is classic deflection. It's like you unleashed chaos gremlins at a catered event, Rachel. Sit down. Sometimes the best revenge is just showing people what actually happened and letting them do the math. But the next story proves you don't always need cameras to catch someone. Sometimes you just need a fake promotion. I should have known the moment my new roommate insisted on a vibe check before signing the lease that things were going to go sideways. Her name was Lila. On the surface, she was friendly, super chill, said she didn't believe in drama, and claimed she was all about positive energy. She showed up to the apartment tour wearing crystals, hugged our landlord, and told me our shared space was aligned. At the time, I just wanted someone who paid rent on time and didn't eat my groceries. I thought her quirks were harmless. I was wrong. For the first month, things were fine. We weren't best friends, but we coexisted well enough. She had her friends over sometimes, burned incense that made the place smell like a head shop, and played healing frequencies on YouTube at 2 a.m. But hey, at least she didn't leave dishes in the sink. Then, little things started happening. A package went missing from our front door. Nothing major, just some skincare I'd ordered online. I figured maybe it got stolen from the hallway. It happens. Then another box disappeared. Then a third. I started getting those delivery confirmation emails. Your package was delivered. But I'd come home and nothing. At first, I assumed it was bad luck. Our apartment had a shared entryway with 3 other units. Maybe someone else took it by mistake. But when I casually mentioned it to Lila, her whole vibe shifted. She looked thrilled. "Oh my God," she said, eyes wide. "That's been happening to me too. Like, I swear someone is watching us or something. Maybe it's the neighbor downstairs." He gives off creepy energy. I remember thinking it was weird how fast she blamed someone. And even weirder how she suddenly started talking about needing a security cleanse for the apartment. Like we'd been cursed. But whatever, I let it slide. Then came the maintenance request. I got a call from our landlord saying that someone reported suspicious damage in our shared hallway closet. Apparently, a broom handle had been snapped clean in half, and the drywall behind it had a dent the size of a watermelon. I hadn't opened that closet in weeks. When I asked Lila about it, she gasped, actually gasped, and said she found it that way and was so scared that someone had broken in. She said she didn't want to blame me, but that the landlord had asked if either of us knew anything, and she just had to be honest. Yeah, that's when I started paying closer attention. The final straw came when I got an email from our leasing office saying that there had been multiple complaints about me. Missing packages, loud music late at night. I literally work early shifts and go to bed at 9. A note slid under my door accused me of threatening behavior. It wasn't signed. That's when everything clicked. Lila wasn't just stirring up drama. She was trying to frame me. And the thing is, she was smart about it. Subtle. The kind of manipulator who smiles sweetly while twisting the knife. She didn't confront me directly. She let the landlord do it. She didn't accuse me. She raised concerns, all while pretending she was my roommate therapist. So I decided to play along. I told her I agreed something was weird and that I was thinking of setting up a security camera outside the front door. She lit up. "Yes," she said, "we need protection. I've been meaning to get Sage." What she didn't know is that I also installed 2 hidden cams. One in the shared hallway closet, one pointed at the front door from inside the apartment. Motion activated. Silent. Completely invisible. It took 3 days. The first thing I caught was her taking one of my Amazon packages and sliding it into her room, then coming back out and staging a "what happened to your delivery" moment like she was discovering it with me. I played dumb. The second was chef's kiss. She waited until I left for work, then pulled a broom from the hallway, snapped the handle over her knee like she'd done it 100 times, and jammed it into the drywall behind the utility shelf. Then she took photos of the damage, called the landlord, and sent the pictures off, smiling the whole time. The camera caught everything. So I compiled the footage, put it all on a flash drive, created a timeline, cross-referenced dates with emails from our leasing office. It was a full dossier, and then when the landlord emailed again asking to schedule a conversation about recurring tenant issues, I replied, "Happy to chat. I'd also like to bring some context and documentation for review." We met the following Tuesday. Lila was there, of course, wearing a flowy cardigan and clutching her emotional support crystals. She acted surprised to see me show up with a laptop and folder. The landlord began with the usual: tenant harmony, concerns from the other units, a record of reported disturbances. Lila nodded solemnly the entire time, like she was a therapist listening to a very difficult case. That's when I opened my laptop. "I'd like to show you something," I said. First, I played the video of her taking my package, then the footage of her snapping the broom and staging the damage. Then I handed the landlord a timeline matching each complaint to video evidence of Lila being the one responsible. It was dead silent in that office. Lila didn't even try to deny it. She went pale, then red, then pale again. She started mumbling something about privacy violations and bad energy, but the landlord shut that down fast. By the end of the meeting, she had 3 choices: move out voluntarily, face formal eviction, or deal with lease violations for falsifying tenant complaints. She left in tears. 2 weeks later, she was gone. And because the landlord had blacklisted her with the building's management company, she couldn't rent anywhere in the complex again. She lost her deposit too, because of the damage she caused. I, on the other hand, got a formal apology from the landlord and a rent discount for inconvenience and false complaints, which honestly felt better than any revenge speech I could have given. Wow, that's not just petty. That's calculated sabotage, and she would have gotten away with it too if she hadn't underestimated how patient people can be when they're setting up the receipts. She literally built her own exit plan and then walked straight into it. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving someone enough rope and a motion sensor camera. And if you thought that was sneaky, wait until you hear how one guy turned his noisy neighbor into a walking stress ball. I'm not someone who complains easily. I've lived in apartments for most of my adult life, and I know what comes with the territory. Footsteps above you, the occasional late-night TV, maybe a dog that barks too much. You deal with it. You buy a white noise machine, maybe invest in better earplugs, and you try to be a decent neighbor yourself. But this guy, my upstairs neighbor, was a special kind of nightmare. He moved in about 8 months before all this happened, and from day one, it was like he thought he was renting the VIP lounge of a Vegas club. Every night, like clockwork, the bass would start thumping around 11 p.m. And I'm not talking about casual music. I mean full volume, rattling the pictures on my walls, kind of loud, and it didn't stop at music. He'd have friends over constantly, shouting, laughing, stomping around like they were doing jumping jacks in combat boots. I work in a hospital. Early shifts. I'm usually in bed by 10 and up by 5. The kind of job where being even a little sleep deprived isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I asked him politely to keep it down, multiple times. The first time he smiled and said, "Oh yeah, totally man." Didn't realize it was that loud. The second time he nodded mid-phone call, clearly not listening. The third time he barely opened the door and mumbled something about freedom to live. But that wasn't even the worst part. Then came the breaking point. It was a Sunday night. I had a double shift starting at 6 a.m. on Monday. I was exhausted. All I wanted was one decent night of sleep, but at exactly midnight, the bass started. Again, and this time it was louder than usual. He was throwing a party, people screaming, laughing, someone literally jumping off furniture based on the vibrations I could feel through my walls. I knocked on his door for 20 minutes. Nothing. I even called the landlord and the non-emergency line for the police. By the time they arrived, surprise, he turned everything down and acted like I was being overly sensitive. That was the moment I decided I was done playing nice. I remembered something from a physics class I took years ago. Resonant frequencies. Every building has natural frequencies that, when matched, can amplify vibrations to uncomfortable or even destructive levels. So I did some research. Most apartment buildings built in the 80s, like mine, had structural resonant frequencies between 8 to 12 hertz. You just needed the right kind of rhythmic pressure and a way to deliver it directly through the shared infrastructure. And wouldn't you know it, there's a tool for that. I ordered a pneumatic concrete vibrator online. It's typically used to remove air bubbles from fresh concrete, but with the right adjustments, oh, it becomes a weapon. I rigged up a mounting system to attach it securely to my ceiling, right below where his bedroom was. I moved my bed to the living room and soundproofed the walls with every blanket and towel I owned. Then I set up a timer. Every morning at 5 a.m., that device kicked on. Not for long, just 30 minutes. But that was all it took. The first day I heard him stumbling around above me, confused, probably wondering if he was experiencing an earthquake. The second day I heard him on the phone with someone, maybe the landlord, talking about shaking and weird noises. By the end of the week, he was knocking on other tenants' doors asking if they'd felt it too. But here's the best part. I'd positioned it in such a way and at such a precise frequency that only his unit felt the full effect. The apartments beside him, barely noticeable. And since most people were either asleep or getting ready for work during that time, no one else really cared. Week 2? Oh, that was when things started to unravel. He tried moving furniture around. I could hear him dragging things across the floor at weird hours, probably trying to isolate the source of the problem. Maintenance guys came up a couple times. I listened from below while they poked around in the plumbing and knocked on walls. Nothing. By week 3, he was visibly sleep-deprived. I passed him in the hallway and he looked wrecked. Dark circles, bloodshot eyes. The guy who used to host all-night parties was now whispering into his phone and flinching every time the elevator dinged. Then came the meltdown. One morning, around 5:15, I heard him screaming on the phone. Not like frustrated yelling, screaming. He was demanding to be moved to a different unit, threatening to break his lease, swearing at the landlord about structural issues and psychological warfare. I had to step into the hallway just to hear it. Better. By the end of the month, he was gone. He left a note taped to my door, handwritten. It said, "I'm sorry for all the noise. I didn't realize how much it was affecting you. I hope you sleep better now." The audacity, the irony, the unintentional poetic redemption arc. I mean, sure, it was too little too late, but at least he finally understood what it felt like to have your life constantly disrupted by someone else's noise. And the best part, the new tenant who moved in, a quiet grad student who studies marine biology and owns noise-cancelling headphones. I haven't heard a peep since. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be timed. Honestly, that's art. Using physics and a construction tool to wage silent war is next-level petty, but also kind of brilliant. He wanted the freedom to live how he wanted? Cool. So did you, at 5 a.m. every day. Sometimes karma doesn't come with a warning. It just starts shaking the floor until you get the message. But some betrayals don't come with bass thumping through your ceiling. They come with a signature on a will. I hadn't spoken to my ex, Jess, in over a year. We'd broken up for all the usual reasons: trust issues, emotional manipulation, and a tendency she had to treat my life like her backup savings account. Every time she needed help, money, rides, a place to crash, I was her first call. When things were good, they were good. But when they weren't, I felt like I was dating a con artist with a Pinterest board. So when we finally split for good, it was messy. She didn't take it well. She texted constantly, then flipped to cold silence, then sent passive-aggressive messages to my friends. The classic breakup cocktail: a shot of guilt, a chaser of drama, and absolutely no accountability. Eventually, she faded into the background, and I moved on. What I didn't know was that Jess had one more move up her sleeve, and it involved my grandfather. My grandpa was one of the few people in my life who'd never bought into Jess's charming act. He was sharp, even in his late 80s, and could smell manipulation like a bloodhound. When we were still together, Jess always acted sugary sweet around him, but he never warmed up to her. Said she was too shiny, said she smiled with her teeth, not her eyes. That stuck with me. About 2 months before he passed, he and I had a long talk. He told me he was updating his will and that he wanted me to have something significant. Not just money, but the cabin up north where we used to spend summers. It was sentimental. Family. I was shocked and honored. I said thank you, told him I'd take care of it. What I didn't know was that after that conversation, somehow, somewhere, Jess got to him. I only found out after the funeral. The reading of the will was held at my aunt's house. Formal, but familiar. Everyone was there. My parents, my cousins, my uncle, who always shows up 30 minutes late with stories about traffic, even though he lives 10 minutes away. And then, Jess. She walked in like she belonged there, wearing black like she was starring in a Lifetime movie. She even had the audacity to hug me and say, "I'm so sorry for your loss. He meant a lot to us, US." I pulled my mum aside and whispered, "Why is she here?" She looked just as confused as I was. She said Grandpa invited her. We assumed. You knew? I did not. Then came the bombshell. The lawyer read the will. My name was listed, yes, but so was Jess's. In fact, she'd been re-added to the will just 3 weeks before Grandpa died. And not just some token mention. He'd left her $25,000 in cash. You could hear the air leave the room. Everyone turned and looked at me like I had invited her back into our lives, and she just smiled politely, dabbing her eyes with a tissue like she was auditioning for Widow of the Year. I didn't say anything right then, but my brain was already running, because I knew my grandfather, and I knew he wouldn't change his will on a whim, especially not for someone he didn't trust. Something didn't add up, so I started digging. The next day, I went to his assisted living facility. I asked the front desk if I could review the visitor log. They hesitated, but when I explained the situation, they let me look, and there it was. Jess had visited 4 times in the month before he passed. 2 of those visits were after hours, signed in as family. I checked his phone records. Somehow, she'd gotten his cell number again and had been calling him regularly in the weeks before his death. I checked his email. He had me on the account as backup. Sure enough, there were messages from her full of, "I miss him so much. He was my soulmate and we're working things out." But the worst part? One email said, "Don't tell Mom my name yet. I want it to be a surprise when the will is finalized." Yeah, that's when I remembered something. 2 months earlier, Jess had tried to reconnect. She sent me a long emotional message about closure and wanting to meet up just to talk. I ignored it, but I saved it, along with every voicemail and text she'd sent me over the past year, including a voice memo where she literally said, "You don't deserve what your grandfather's leaving you. If I was still in the picture, it would have gone differently." Guess what? She was still in the picture. She made herself be. So I got to work. I compiled everything. Visitor logs, phone records, emails, voicemails, screenshots. And I waited, just a little bit. A week later, we had a family dinner. A casual one. Everyone was still raw from the funeral, but trying to return to normal. Jess, of course, invited herself to support the family. Mid-meal, I stood up. "I have something to share," I said. I plugged my laptop into the TV. First, the email, then the call logs, then the voice memo. Jess went sheet white. "This is a violation of," she started, but I held up a hand. "I have more." And I played a final voicemail. It was muffled but clear. She was speaking directly to my grandfather. "You don't have to tell anyone," she said. "They'll never know. Just sign the papers and I'll take care of you. Like I always have. Remember how good we were together?" Dead silence. My aunt looked like she was about to throw her wine glass. My mom was already on her phone texting the lawyer. Jess tried to storm out. I stopped her. "You stole time from a dying man to lie your way into money," I said. "You're not walking away clean from that." The will was contested. With the new evidence, the court ruled that the amendment naming Jess was made under false pretenses and emotional coercion. She didn't just lose the money, she was officially cut off from anything related to our family. Blacklisted. My grandfather's original wishes were reinstated, and the cabin, his pride and joy, was passed to me, just like he'd wanted. Last I heard, Jess tried to start a GoFundMe to recover what was stolen from her. It didn't go well. Wow, emotional manipulation is bad enough, but faking a reconciliation with a dying man to sneak back into a will? That's a new level of calculated. She really thought no one would connect the dots or check the visitor logs. Sometimes justice doesn't need a court speech, just a dinner table, a laptop, and the truth on full display. And our final tale? Let's just say it involves a fake engagement ring, a very real receipt, and one perfectly timed family dinner. When he proposed, I really wanted to believe it was perfect. We were in this little garden behind my favorite bookstore, the kind of place that looks like it fell out of a cottagecore Pinterest board. Twinkle lights, quiet music, him down on one knee. And when he opened the ring box, I'll admit it, I got emotional. It sparkled, it fit perfectly, and he told me it was a family heirloom, passed down from my grandmother, he said, voice cracking just enough to sell the drama. So, of course, I said yes. But 2 weeks later, the sparkle started to look different. I'm not someone who obsesses over jewelry, but I know enough to notice when something that used to catch light like a disco ball starts looking like glass in a Walmart display case. And then, a few days later, my best friend came over and held my hand under the light. You know this isn't a diamond, right?" I laughed. "It's an heirloom." She blinked. "Okay, well, Then your fiancé's family must have gotten scammed because this is cubic zirconia. I froze. Now, I didn't want to believe her right away. I told myself maybe she was wrong. Maybe it just needed a cleaning. So I took the ring to a jeweler under the pretense of resizing. The guy looked at it for 10 seconds and said, "This is CZ, maybe worth $40 on a good day." $40. I thanked him and walked out, my ears ringing. I felt sick. Not because I cared about the money, but because of what it meant. He lied. Not just a little white lie to get through the moment. A story. An elaborate, emotionally manipulative narrative right in the middle of one of the biggest moments of our relationship. So when I got home, I confronted him. He blinked. "What are you talking about?" "The ring," I said. "It's not a diamond. It's not a family heirloom. It's fake." And he didn't even pause, just scoffed and said, "Wow. So that's what this is about? I give you something meaningful and you want to appraise it like a pawn shop?" I stared at him. "You told everyone it was your grandmother's," I said. "You said it had been in the family for decades." "Yeah, because that's what people expect," he shrugged. "I wanted the proposal to be special, and lying was your solution?" He looked at me like I was the problem. "You're being materialistic. You should be grateful I proposed at all." "Oh, okay. Gaslighting, check turning his lie into my flaw. Also check." And that was when I decided I wasn't going to argue about this. I was going to return the favor. So I boxed up the ring and drove to a high-end jeweler. Not to buy anything, mind you, just to get a quote. I found a ring that looked as close to his heirloom as possible. Same shape, same setting, but with an actual diamond. The price tag, $8,400. Perfect. I went home, typed up a professional-looking invoice, and printed it on actual stationery. I included the ring photo, SKU number, description, and price breakdown. At the bottom, I wrote, "Greater than per your previous statement, please find attached the invoice to replace the family heirloom you misrepresented. Since it was not in fact passed down and holds no real value, I assume you're open to covering the cost of a real diamond." Then I attached a sticky note. This felt like the kind of thing your mum should help you handle. And I CC'd his mother. Now, if you're thinking that's petty, oh, just wait. Because 2 days later, I got a phone call from his mother. She was screaming, "What the hell is this? You think you can just demand thousands of dollars because you didn't like the ring?" I calmly replied, "I'm not demanding anything. Just matching the energy. Your son misled me and everyone else. I thought you'd appreciate knowing the truth, since you posted that lovely Facebook status about how family treasures always stay with the right woman." Dead silence. She hung up. That night, I got a string of texts from him, ranging from "you're insane" to "why would you drag my family into this?" to my personal favorite. "This is exactly why I didn't get you a real diamond. You don't deserve one." I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a subtle little photo dump to Instagram. A stack of wedding magazines in the recycling. A boxed up ring. A caption, "Turns out the heirloom wasn't the only thing that was fake." People noticed. A few of his friends messaged me saying they were shocked. One even said, "He told us he spent $10,000 on that ring." Said it almost wiped his savings. Another sent me screenshots of him bragging in a group chat. "Family diamond," he wrote. She totally cried. It unraveled fast. Last I heard, he deleted his social media for a while. His mom went on some Facebook rampage about how young people today are too sensitive, and then turned her account private. I got my ring appraised again, still $40. I donated it to a thrift store, and as for me, I dodged a marriage to someone who thinks lying is romantic and manipulation is a personality trait. So yeah, sometimes the ring doesn't mean a thing. But the receipt? That speaks volumes. Wow. Imagine faking an entire family legacy just to save a few bucks, and then blaming you for wanting honesty. He really thought the sparkle would distract you from the fact that it was literally held together by delusion and rhinestones. Sometimes being the reasonable person in an unreasonable situation makes you look like the villain, until the invoice goes out. That's it for tonight's chaos. Poetic justice, petty brilliance, and a whole lot of receipts. If you've made it all the way here, you're as hooked as I am. Sweet dreams, everyone. And remember, sometimes karma takes a while, but it always arrives. See you in the next one.